The views and opinions expressed in this podcast by the host and or the guest do not necessarily reflect the views of the host and or Paranormal Buzz Radio and or its sponsors. Use of any material produced by Paranormal Buzz Radio without express written consent is prohibited. Paranormal Buzz Radio will not be held responsible for you holding your knees, crying, and rocking in a corner in a puddle of your own urine, or being beheaded by a group of children in a cornfield. In fact, if you come across a group of children in a cornfield, we promise to make fun of you as you run away screaming in terror. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to RAP Paranormal and Friends with your hosts,
Kim Purvis
and Allison Robinson. Make sure to check us out on our Facebook pages, RAP Paranormal and Friends and RAP Paranormal Busters, for up-to-date show information and events. Hey everyone, welcome to RAP Paranormal and Friends. I am welcoming a returning guest, Phill Webster, to the show. You guys may know that he wrote the book Letting Glow, and now he's back to talk about his second book, Glowing Deeper. So please welcome Phill to the show. Welcome back.
Thanks, Allison. Nice to be back. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, in your first book, Letting Glow, you discuss kind of the passing of your mom and how this took you on a journey to be in touch with your consciousness, spirituality, and mediumship. And now you have a second book out, Glowing Deeper. What made you write these books so close together?
So I felt like after I'd finished writing Letting Glow, I mean, as we talked about before, just to briefly recap, the night before my mum passed away, I saw a man standing next to her on a video call, and I believe that he wasn't there. She didn't claim that anyone was there. And I asked her a few times, like, who was that? And she was like, well, who's what? And then the next day she passed away. So it really sent me down this deep rabbit hole of looking into spiritual practices, and that's essentially where the first book came from. Mm-hmm. So thought that sort of pouring my grief into the first book, and then learning about all these amazing spiritual things and looking into mediumship, and then just pretty much just having one experience after the other, for the better part of a year. I just felt like I've got another book in me at the end of the day. And I felt like I'd personally progressed so much from the start of that book to the end, and I'd learned so much. So the second book continues, pretty much the first book was kind of like a life story in a way of my own. And the second book's kind of less about me and more about sort of wider spiritual practices and all the things that I learned about, really. I just really, just poured into it.
Now, going back to the story with your mom and how you were talking to her and you saw the man. Now, you kind of discuss this or say that you kind of had like a shared death experience with her. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so it's an interesting one because I've mentioned this once before, and I mentioned it first time round. I didn't write about this in the first book.
Right.
But I did start talking about it a little bit, and a couple of people called me out and said, well, that's not a shared death experience. And I'm like, well, I know what it, sort of on paper one is or traditionally is. But the day that my mum passed, I went down to where she lived. She lived on a place called the Isle of Wight. So it took me a while to get down there. Plus it was COVID. Boats weren't running, all this stuff. So, it took a long time, and they'd taken her away by the time I got there. So I didn't get to see her, and again, COVID, so there was none of that. But anyway, it was the most hollow, empty feeling to sort of just walk into my childhood home and, that place where my mum always was, and then there's all this stuff everywhere where she'd just been there, and it's just, if anyone's ever been through that, it's really it sucks, to say the least. But I went to bed that night, and I slept in my mum's bed, and I suppose, I mean, at the end of the day, I guess it was a dream, but it was one of the most profound dreams I've ever had. And again, sort of like later on, looking back on it, I was thinking, well, maybe I don't think that was a dream. So I was facing my mum, and it was vivid, and she was, standing there, sort of asking me, like, well, what's going on? And the interesting thing was that we were in a room. And the room again was just not like anything. When I have dreams about random stuff and this and that, people know. But this was like this surreal room, like a moving piece of art. The walls were in motion, and we were both just standing facing each other. And I just got the very strong sense that she was in this kind of state of limbo. And she was just asking me what's going on, and I said, well, they're saying that it's your heart. And I remember her hand went to her chest, and she just kind of looked a bit confused, and she was like, "What are you going to be okay?" And I was like, "I'm going to be fine." I was like, you got to do this, and I'll be absolutely fine. And she turned around and she left, and I woke up just many times that night, I guess. But I remember waking up from that, just being like, "Wow, that was overwhelmingly profound." And I thought, well, what again? There was a lot of things that happened that day and then the night before, but I truly felt like that I witnessed her leaving. So people have argued with me and said, well, that's not a shared death experience because it happened later that night. As you know, I've got a very strange way of looking at time over a bunch of other stuff. But, I feel that time doesn't exist the way that it exists or the way that we think that it exists anyway, in ultimate reality, and then definitely not when we pass over. So I feel that could at least explain some of that, the sort of the time difference.
Yes. Now, your book, Glowing Deeper, you claim that it's attempting to demystify and mystical. What do you mean by that? What are?
Yeah, I feel that we all pretty much have these experiences. We all have these moments of intuition, and I think we might have talked about it before as well. But we all have these terms for things like we can't quite put a finger on something, or you can cut the air with a knife, and everyone's fine with that. But as soon as you start saying clairsentience or clairtangence or something, then people are like, oh no, whatever. And I think we're essentially talking about the same thing, and I feel that when we really sort of learn to sit and tune into our intuition, and especially through meditation, that we get better at sort of becoming aware of our place in the world, then when these things come in, then then you start sort of taking notice of them more. Also, I know a lot of skeptics would argue that that when you start looking for signs, then you're going to see them, and I think that is actually the case. But I think that that's just the way it works. I think they're everywhere, and we just go about our business, and we don't take much notice of these things, but they're all around us, and when you do start paying attention, then they kind of stick around a bit easier, and it's easy to recognize the next one.
Now, in this book, you dive a little bit deeper into like metaphysics and being in the then and now. Can you elaborate a little bit on that for our listeners?
I'll do my best. It's easier to write about it when I can sit and research and stuff. And, talking about it's another story. But, so again, just sort of, I had this really overwhelming experience in my mid-30s where doctors said it was a psychotic break. And I felt that I was essentially trapped in the moment of now. And linear time had fallen away, and it was just kind of like now, all the time. I couldn't switch it off, and it went on for like about a year or more than a year, and I truly thought I was going out of my mind until I found somebody that sort of taught me about meditation and sort of essentially grounded me again. But it was this very overwhelming experience of just being right here, right now, like ultimate awareness, like a spotlight was being shone on me or something. And I've rarely heard people talk about it. Eckhart Tolle talks about connecting with the moment of now, but this was like times 1,000, you know. And I really thought that I was done, to be honest. But anyway, you know, through that experience, I felt that I find it quite easy through meditation and visualization exercises to really just sort of instantly tune into the present. And I think that it was kind of a fallout from that experience. I'm sort of going off on a tangent here. Sorry.
Oh, you're totally fine. Nope, you're good.
But yeah, you know, I mean, a lot of people now, just to sort of talk about one aspect of it, are talking, I think it's a popular kind of buzz term among spiritual communities where people are talking about shifting timelines, for example, you know, and I suppose the idea is that we can sort of manifest. So essentially, just to go back, I guess if we've only got now, like there's only now all the time. So it's always been like that. Everything that ever has been is happening right now, and everything that could possibly happen is happening right now in various, you know, multifarious dimensions, which is just, you know, it's a lot to sort of take in. And I suppose the theory of jumping timelines is that, you know, you just sort of jump to one of those realities out there where you're already living on a yacht in the Bahamas or whatever it is that you know, aspire to. And yeah, I mean, it does make sense to me. It's a lot to wrap your head around. But I think at the end of the day, when we can sort of just tune into this moment, and this is where everything starts and go, I don't know, starts and ends. I guess it doesn't end. It's just, it's nuts. It's nuts when you start looking into it. And I think I'm done. I think I'd need to read this out of the book. I just can't. I need to work on talking about that.
No, you're totally fine. You're totally fine. Now, what do you mean by the slipstream super highway? What do you? Slipstream
superhighway. Yeah, like that's kind of just sort of a term I came up with when I was trying to explain all that I just explained. You know, I feel that we have this. You know, I don't know. I don't want to say hidden, like a. You know, like an alternate world that's running alongside us. That kind of once you jump on it, then you're like, oh, okay, this thing's real. This is a real thing, you know. And again, through the first year or two of just really delving into mediumship and learning all about these things, it just seemed like one amazing thing after another was happening. And I don't mean in sort of practical terms. I just mean I was having these crazy mystical experiences like every month or so. And then especially around mediumship, you know, that in itself is just, you know, when you get to listen to a good medium or somebody gives you evidence,
right,
and then learning about it myself and giving other people evidence, this stuff's crazy, right? You know, but it's a real thing. And I would have dismissed it, you know, 5 or 6 years ago. But yeah, I really feel that, you know, by talking about the slipstream superhighway, I feel like there's just this, you know, literally that running along beside us right now, or you know, billions of that we can switch to and sort of, and you know, just manifest and go forward from there.
Now, talking about mediumship, is this something that you're trying to pursue, like actually be like a full-on medium that maybe could help others, or?
Well, I've never sort of. Initially, I just really wanted to know that my mum was still around, and that's where it came from, to be honest. And kind of, I've had that confirmed again and again, and I felt satisfied with that. And I must admit, through the first year after, or this past year since the first book was released, and I kind of got caught up in promotion and people talking about book sales and all this stuff that I didn't even realize was a thing, you know, that was part of it. It kind of took me away from the more sort of spiritual aspects that I just wrote about. It was like this weird catch-22 thing. So this book's out there, and then I'm not able to, you know, live it. You know?
Right, yeah.
So I feel like I'm slowly coming back to it. I just joined a new circle. I went to one the other day with the teacher of mine, somebody that was really an integral part of learning about mediumship, a lady called Claire Broad, who was kind of really my first introduction to mediumship. And yeah, it's kind of come full circle, and I've recently started training with her. Well, it will be more consistently. But I must admit, the first session was, again, after not practicing a while, I kind of got you know, gave some evidence in the practice, like immediately, and she was like, yeah, confirm this, confirm that. And some of it's just the most random stuff. I'm like, I don't know if this makes sense to you, but blah, blah, blah. And she's like, yeah, you know. So seems that, you know, still got it.
Hey, well, that's good.
But yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I feel like, you know, I'm not I feel like my end goal isn't to be, like a platform medium or anything like that, but I feel that it's going to be part of it. It's going to be part of this sort of bigger journey that's opened up to me. And I mean, I'll definitely keep trying to develop as a medium. But again, at the end of the day, I don't feel like I want to be necessarily standing up there giving readings for people. So let's see. Yeah,
I totally get that. In your book, you kind of break it up with some meditations. What are you hoping that your readers are getting from these meditations? Like,
I mean, I think
they accomplish.
Yeah, I feel that they're just beneficial regardless, of what anyone's doing. Even if you're working as a steel worker and you're not interested in, paranormal stuff or any of that. I feel that meditation is going to be beneficial anyway, So I think right off the bat, it's just a good thing to do. It's definitely helped me a lot in terms of mediumship. It's obviously the path to it, unless you're, somebody that just is like super, intuitive and picks up on these things like all day long. I feel that, just being able to sit with yourself and step back from your thoughts and recognize your own thoughts. And then again, in terms of mediumship, when something else steps in, then you start to recognize what's not you, I suppose. You sort of get used to that scramble of thoughts that's just rambling on all the time. And then there's this kind of thing that comes to a little bit clearer. At least this is how it is for me. And then it's like, oh, okay, this is probably the message. Again, it's like early days for me with that. But like in theory, I mean, same with Letting Glow. I just kind of documented my journey in real time. And I've sort of tried to continue that with the meditations in Glowing Deeper, that they kind of start pretty basic, and then as the book progresses, it goes back to mediumship and connecting with spirit guides. And so in theory, if the reader sort of follows along, at least that's what's worked for me. So hopefully it could work for them.
Do you think that your meditations could help somebody do like astral projections or anything of that nature?
I mean, I hope so. I mean, I've touched on it in the book. Astral projection isn't something that I've really explored thoroughly myself. I've had astral projection experiences. It could be argued that we all do and don't know about it, on a nightly basis.
Right.
But there's a meditation in there specifically about trying to achieve separation, and it's just kind of like what I've learned about it again, and just sort of giving it back to the reader. And with practice, I believe that absolutely could be the first steps towards that, if that's of interest.
Now, another thing that you talk about in your book a lot is that we are not our thoughts. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? Because I've been saying that a lot,
right?
And I'm not the only person that says that. But then when you look at it, because I was kind of thinking, have I just like dug myself into a hole? Because I've been writing another book lately, and it feels like it's going off on a wider, into a wider sort of perspective. And I'm sort of, I was going to say we, because I feel like I'm not writing it. I'm just going to go out there. I feel like I'm getting this information from someone else. It's almost like a conversation, and it's kind of gone in the direction of, well, if anyone's talking about manifesting, then essentially you're saying that you've got to be that feeling of where you want to get to. But then at the same time, I'm saying that we're not our thoughts. And I think there's a difference in that. I feel that thoughts are a useful tool to sort of navigate us towards what we want to do, or what we want to achieve. And everything comes from thought. This table that I'm sitting at comes from someone's thought. And then they manifested it into reality by physically making it. So literally everything comes from that. But in terms of our core, like who we are, and again, being able to step back from the thoughts, then you kind of come to this knowing, there's that feels like the integral you, your intuition, or any of that. And even if you're sort of not practicing, if you're not meditating, it sort of steps in every now and again when you most need it. I think, in times of crisis, you get this quiet voice at the back that's like, okay, this needs to be done, kind of. So I think that's I suppose tapping into that is intuition, feeling. Thoughts can be useful, but they also come up with a lot of crap. At least mine do. So it's just trying to sort of separate that whole sort of like marching parade of madness, and then just being able to step back and just let it go, and use them for what they're good for. Yeah.
Excuse me, sorry.
I don't know.
Now, also in your book, besides talking about, spirituality, mediumship, meditations, kind of bringing it all together, there's also a part in your book where you talk about witchcraft, tarot, shamanism, etc.
Yeah.
How do you bring that all together? How does it all come together in this book? How does it all tie together?
I'm not sure. It's like I don't know how to categorize it, but they were like, "Yeah, this is great. Let's publish it." So, I was okay. You guys figure it out. But I just felt like, again, I'd learned so much, and I thought, well, what would I want to read about at this point? And there were there's so much out there, about also that goes in all sorts of directions. So I just kind of try to touch on all of it, or not all of it. Some of it, I'm talking about tarot cards, history of witchcraft. I feel like I've given my own spin on the history of witchcraft a little. Some people might disagree with me about the origins of it. I did study, sorry, forgive me. I'm just completely blanking. Female spirituality in the Middle Ages for the University of Barcelona, and that very much dove into witchcraft. As you would imagine it would. So I kind of stuck around that area of time. Obviously, you guys have got the Salem witch trials, and we could go to New Orleans and talk about voodoo, and there's all sorts of stuff that could be tied to it. But I just kind of stuck with the European Middle Age perspective of it, and I just found it fascinating. Just the persecution of. I mean, we'd already, be hung or burned by now halfway through this conversation.
I know, right?
So it's crazy, and yeah, I've got this wrote down because I can't sort of reel it off the top of my head, but one sort of group that I found really interesting were these women called the Beguines. That weren't nuns, but they were kind of they were moved in the same circles, but they weren't attached to the church, and this was like 1200s to 1600. I might be wrong about the last part. 1200s onwards, they started talking about like a more open form of spirituality, pretty much how we talk about it today. And they were working like alongside monks and stuff like that. And then as soon as anything went wrong, then they got the blame for it immediately. They were like, okay, well, that's clearly because of these. These women that are talking like poetic nonsense about God being, available to all without the religious doctrine. So I feel that they were really, the sort of what we know as the sort of era of the witch. I feel like that it began there. I mean, they essentially started burning them at the stake, and then from that came from witch hunting, and then and another amazing thing was that. In this country, in the UK, this Witchcraft Act, which was essentially like you can go out and hunt a witch, wasn't abolished until 1951, which is nuts.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I don't think anyone was hunting witches in 1951 anymore, but you could if you wanted.
You wanted to. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. And that's just insane. And the thing is that, growing up, I always thought of, witches as, broomsticks. It was all bad. They were doing spells to do harm and things like that, which, they thought back then that's what they were doing. But in reality, most of them, nowadays use it for healing properties, and they're more in tune with like nature and things like that. I knew some people back in school who were like Wiccan, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're like the devil or something like that. But as I've gone older and been into this, you realize that's not the case at all.
Absolutely. And I feel, and ironically, I feel that if you, and I shouldn't generalize really, but if you were to go down a sort of like darker path with it, then that's typically men that are exploiting these kind of ideas, for personal gain. But fascinating stuff.
I'm sure there are some still out there that do rituals and sacrifice animals and whatnot and stuff like that.
Right.
You still hear about some of that, but the majority of it is not that we hear about now is not really like that. And
that's it. Yeah.
But it's insane how far it goes back because I had read something about, like it being in the Bible, I believe, or something like that. You know, about it.
That I quoted, and I think it said that thou shalt not permit a witch to live. I can't remember what.
Something. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was like, holy cow. I mean, it goes way back earlier than what we had really, I think. That it did.
I feel that before that, I feel that like if you really sort of dive into it, there's like ancient Mesopotamia, and you know, women were. As far as we know, I mean, if that's even a sign that they were taking care of all the sort of healing and the spiritual side of things and all that, and men just decided they didn't like it, you know, and kind of took over and came up with these gods and were like, yeah, well, no, they don't want you to do that anymore, you know, and I don't know. I need to learn more.
So, but what got you interested in this?
I just felt that, you know, like if I was to pick up a book on the esoteric, then what would I mean, I feel like these first two books were like Letting Glow was kind of like a soft introduction to spirituality. As I was learning, I was just writing it down. And then the second one, I felt like I learned a lot, but I'm still very much at the start of this journey. But I thought, well, let's just have some fun with it. Let's throw some stuff about witchcraft in. Let's throw some stuff about tarot cards, all the sort of traditional kind of things that you might come across, and then sort of touched on shamanism as well. And I don't know, and what I found really interesting was the connection between all of these. You know, when you go back to ancient traditions like Celtic traditions and people in, especially around the UK, talking about fairies and elves and pixies, all this stuff that I would have just dismissed as like kind of whatever. That's not really my thing. But they're all connected, you know, and even some of the names were the same. Like, you know, with the Atlantic between America and it's crazy stuff, you know. They're all essentially talking about the same stuff, and then also the similarities between, especially with shamanic traditions and just sort of mediumship as we use it today, you know.
Now, do you think that you would ever practice as like a shaman or anything, or have you ever practiced with anybody that was a shaman? Or
I got lucky enough to talk with a couple of indigenous people. I feel like it's a tricky. Again, I was so excited to write this book, and this is kind of tied into something else. So. You know, like everyone and their grandmother claims to have like a Native American spirit guide, right? You know,
right?
When you sort of go into mediumship, and I thought, and it started to seem like a bit of a cliche, and then lo and behold, I was meditating, and
and you have one,
well, I believe this lady presented herself to me. I wasn't expecting a female, and you know, I'm still sort of working out what I think spirit guides are and all the rest of it. Maybe they just present themselves as what's
what you want them to be like, or what you see them as, or something, or right,
perhaps, you know. So I just went down this rabbit hole of like really looking into sort of into that kind of area of the world and traditions, but also trying to be mindful of the fact that I'm, you know, I'm a white Englishman. I don't want to start claiming that I'm, you know, have any connection or any right to even talk about those things, really, you know. And of course it is a sensitive area in terms of, you know, cultural misrepresentation and all that kind of stuff. So I wrote about it, but I'm trying to be careful how I talk about it. So,
no worries. Now, you kind of talked about earlier. You said that you're writing another book, so you have a third book coming out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not sure where I even am in it. So, you know, again, this last year. I was just thinking, okay, well, I wrote the first two back to back, and so I was just kind of expecting book 3 to show up really the same way, and it hasn't. And I was just, I was weirdly enough, I was in Iraq. I was filming a TV show there. At the end, like October, November. It's just a random thing that came out of nowhere. It wasn't a place that I thought I would go to.
Yes.
And I had a lot of time on my hand around the filming and stuff, and I thought, well, let's try writing, you know. And then something sort of just started coming up. Like, I hate to sort of compare it to someone like Neil Donald Walsh or something like that, but it's that kind of thing that seems to be going. And so I'm just going with it. And essentially, it told me to get out of Iraq, and that was like just as the whole trouble around. Lisa's kicking off. Nothing's actually in the area where I was, but I did heed its advice and leave a week early. And then it's just sort of flowed from there, and I felt like it was going to be book 3 of this trilogy, but it feels like it's expanding into something beyond mediumship and stuff that I've talked about before, and it's crazy. I feel like I'm learning a lot from it. You know, the stuff that I'm writing that I'm like, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I sound completely nuts, but yeah, what can you do?
So you're basically saying that you're getting this information, but you're not exactly sure where it's coming from or how you know it, correct? Is that kind of what you feel like?
I've questioned it.
Like you're
I've
getting a
questioned it.
download from somebody?
Yeah, I feel like it's just more like channeling. Just like throwing that out, just channeling.
Yeah.
But
I know,
I
know about channeling.
it just seems to come through very, very easily and sort of eloquently and very precisely. And I've been trying to sort of. I'm like, well, I sort of got over the idea that this is just me. That I'm sitting here having a conversation with myself,
right?
And been asking stuff that I don't know. I'm like, okay, I don't know this. I'm just gonna, what are you gonna say about that? If I'm sitting here writing to myself,
right?
And then this stuff comes through, then I'm like, shit, I didn't know that. I really didn't. So it's crazy, I'm guessing guides. I haven't got a name or anything like that. But I did get a very detailed description of a kind of like I think hierarchy isn't the right word, but that would be the sort of best way to describe it of guys that are closer to us and guys that are further up and so on and so on. Yeah, it's amazing. So I'll write it and I'll see if anybody wants to publish it. Yeah.
You don't sound crazy when you say, when you're writing a book, that you feel like you're getting your information from somebody else, because I've had a lot of people on the show that have had that same occurrence. Like a lot of them just say that I've gotten this information from some other, whatever, and I just felt like I had to write it. Like they may have gotten it in a dream or something like that or whatever. But I think it's more common than
I think so. Realize. I think so. I mean, I'm definitely not the first. I think this stuff's been going on. Well, who knows how long? But sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. But yeah, it's really nuts. It's really nuts, and I'm sort of like eager to really just get back to it to see what it's going to come up with next. Because it really just feels like this is like a learning process for me. And I got to say, that's what I was going to say, is that at the start I just had to stop. I was like, okay, this is freaking me out. Like it was genuinely sort of going really deep into stuff like we sort of touched on about time and all that. That I've been like, okay, I need 2 days off this. This is like beyond me,
Yeah, you do get pretty deep, and you get in some areas I'm like, oh my gosh, this is way above my head, but it was very interesting, and I was like, holy cow, this is just like, mind blowing.
The second book.
Yeah, in the second book.
Oh, thanks. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's weird because, like, I finished it like a year ago or something like that, and it's kind of funny because you move forward and then you have to sort of go back and think, okay, what was I saying?
Yeah. I'm sure that's what happens. You write it all down, and then sometimes, you got to go back because you don't. Especially since you wrote 2 books back to back, it'd be hard to remember what you put in what book. Now, do you have anything else besides trying to write this 3rd book? Do you have any other things that are going on that you're working on or anything?
I'm sort of tentatively going towards. I would like to get some people together, like have like an online circle. Again, I'm not calling myself a medium.
Right.
So I'm not sort of like suggesting that I'm going to be a medium sitting there teaching people about mediumship, but I would love to get a group of people together and just a place where we could just get together and meditate and talk about all these things that we're talking about, and there's inevitably going to be some mediumship in there anyway, but more of a sort of a practice space rather than me sitting there like some sort of guru or something like that. You know what I mean? But I'm just sort of not sure how to go about it. So this is kind of a new area for me. But I've started talking about it on social media. I'm going to talk about it on my website, and if anyone's interested, then feel free to let me know.
Sure, yeah. So if you want to give our listeners then like your social media or website or any way that they can get in touch with you, so if they have any questions or if they're interested in learning more about meditation or mediumship, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website's philwebster.com, and it's Phill with two L's, because there's a few of us out there, and you might end up with some blacksmith guy in Yorkshire. But so philwebster.com, and then same on Instagram, and I'm sort of dabbling with TikTok, and that's pretty much it. Yeah.
All right, just writing that down here. All right, so your book comes out in what, 3 weeks here? Weeks?
So here it's out on the 26th in the UK on Friday, and then everywhere else it's going to be February the 1st, and it's available at all the usual bookshops you can order it at. As far as I know, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, all of it. Should be able to. And the first one's obviously been out since last April.
Yep, and that one is available on anywhere you can purchase a book as well. So
of course Amazon.
Amazon, yep, that's a big one. A lot of people, I think, go to that one. So everybody that's listening, please go out and check out Phil's books. Letting Glow and then Glowing Deeper will be available February 1st here in the States. Make sure to check them out on anywhere that you purchase your books. If you have any other questions for Phill, you can find them at phillwebster.com, and that's with 2 L's for Phill, or Instagram. And now you're dabbling in TikTok, correct? I don't have TikTok, so I don't know. I don't know a whole lot about that, but
it takes a lot of time. It's a lot of time to make those videos. Yeah,
I'm sure it is. I'm not tech savvy enough for that, I don't think. All right. Well, thank you, Phill, for being on.
Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, absolutely, anytime. And like I said, please go check out his books. They're very well written. They got a lot of information in there. A lot of different meditations and things in there that you can try out at home. So I do highly recommend it, and thanks again for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Yep. Peace out, everybody.